Hello everybody, my name is Erin Sutherland and today I will be discussing the leader-member exchange theory. So before we get into the presentation, I'd like to briefly explain these two terms. A few theories that I will be discussing talk about in-groups and out-groups when referring to an organization's followers. An in-group refers to sort of the inner circle of followers. In-group followers have proven to the leader that they are trustworthy and efficient employees. They're often agreeable in terms of departmental goals and attitudes. And the out-group is the more distant group of followers. They don't have a healthy relationship with the leader, and they could be thought of as sort of the slackers of the group with less internal motivation. Leaders don't trust out-groupers as much as they do for in-groupers, and so they assign them work that reflects that opinion. So, of course, I will circle back to these two terms, but I just want to let everybody know what I'm referring to when I say in-group and out-group heading through the presentation. Leader membership exchange theory, which I'll be referring to throughout this presentation as LMX, first came about through the vertical dyad linkage, also known as VDL. Fred Dansereau, George Grain, and William Hege used VDL as the foundation of leader membership exchange theory and adapted its ideas to form LMX in 1975. Therefore, to understand LMX, we really must first understand VDL. And so VDL can be thought of as sort of an extension of the linking pin concept, and that's shown in this figure to the right here. This concept describes that the dual membership roles of certain members who make up the levels of organizational hierarchy. For example, restaurant general managers would link two levels, the restaurant staff and upper management. In this example, general managers would be referred to as the linking pins. They're also shown as arrows in this figure to the right. VDL exists to describe the relationship between the superiors and their subordinates. And this puts the survival of the organization and the hierarchy in a different light. If we think of the organization like a chain of pins, again, the arrows in this figure, the chain or the organization is only as strong as its weakest pin. And therefore it can be inferred that healthy and strong relationships between each level will lead to organizational success. And so VDL goes beyond just this linking pin concept of how the hierarchical levels relate to each other, but they introduce the in-group and out-group. And then LMX takes this a little bit further and not only talks about in-groups and out-groups, but they explain that managers can kind of use and manipulate in-groups and out-groups to get the job done of the organization. So I made this little graph on Bubble just to sort of further illustrate how these different theories build on each other to create LMX. Here we have the linking pin concept, which we know just describes the dyadic relationship between the hierarchical levels. VDL takes that further with the in and out group notion, and then again LMX uses the in and out group to kind of further the organization's progress. So moving on to the actual development of the theory. For about the first 2 decades of LMX research, scholars studied LMX through the lens of role theory. Role theory states that individuals function in their daily lives and work by living into socially defined and derivated roles. But beginning in the early 90s, researchers began to explain LMX through social exchange theory rather than this role theory. Exchange theory argues that through this theory, individuals evaluate their relationships based on the potential costs and the potential gains of the relationship, which seems sort of shallow, but it is a very economic way of viewing human interaction, especially in the terms of management. So this provided the very basic foundation for LMX research. In this slide, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of exactly how this theory plays out in real life. So these stages occur at an individual level where leader expressions are seen as events to influence followers' individual emotional responses. So the first stage is called role-taking, which I've termed meet and judge. It's like a meet and greet, but with a lot more judgment. Here, leaders and followers, or you could think of it as the managers and the employees, meet, and then the manager assesses the employees to try to get a feel for which employees would be efficient and trustworthy. Cropenzano, Dasborough, and Weiss suggest that LMX development really begins here, where the leader initiates the opportunity for a high-quality relationship with the member. The next stage is called the role-making stage, which I think of as the time to solidify or resolve the leader's initial judgment of the followers. In this stage, the managers give the group of followers a project to work on. During this time, the leader watches followers and their performance to determine if the followers are trustworthy and good employees like they had previously judged them to be. LMX suggests that from these observations, the leader categorizes his or her group of followers into two categories, which are, again, the in-group and the out-group. This categorization or differentiation is private and only for the leaders to know, so the followers don't know if they're in the in-group or in the out-group. And so again, just coming back to the in and out group, the in group is going to be the more trusted followers. They're going to be assigned more challenging roles because leadership assumes that they can handle it. They're also going to be involved in more discussion-related tasks, so if the leader needs any sort of feedback, they would go to the in group for opinions. And the out group is going to be assigned easier work usually. They're going to be more micromanaged because there's a lower level of trust there. And because of that low level of trust, they're also going to receive more direct communication between themselves and leadership. So the third step is called routinization. And in this final step, the in-group will work hard to maintain their in-group status, and the out-group starts to distrust the managers because they've sort of figured out that they're not in the in-group. LMX scholars recommend that leaders return to the out-group members and give them an opportunity to rise to in-group status. The leader might offer the out-grouper an assignment to see if the out-grouper rises to the task. If the out-group member remains uninterested, the leader could ask, what's going on? What are you really interested? Are you not involved because you're truly an out-group member and you just have low internal motivation? Or can we sort of get you in the game? How can we use your strengths to further the organization? So the leader should try at every turn to give this out-group member an opportunity to join the in-group. And that's how that routinization sort of works. And other scholars like the Cropenzano, Dasborough, and Weiss-Source suggest that should the out-grouper feel that they can't rise up, they may quit or relocate. So it's very important for the leaders to give these out-groupers sort of second chances. Cropenzano, Dasborough, and Weiss again state that if these in-group or out-group divisions are accurate, then the individuals who benefit from the system are likely to experience gratitude. This gratitude strengthens the LMX relationship. However, followers who feel they are unfairly grouped or disadvantaged often experience condemning type emotions like anger, distrust, disgust, or contempt toward the leader, and these type of emotions obviously weakens the LMX relationship. Next, LMX argues that the leaders are going to treat these different groups differently, of course. And that's going to be depending whether or not these members are in the in-group and out-group. But here we approach the idea of emotional entrainment. That's the idea that all of these in-group, out-group experiences, sequences, and opportunities lead to emotional entrainment. The emotions of the followers begin to exhibit common rhythms because these individuals experience the same work schedule and work stressors. And the idea of entrainment was actually initially used to examine biological rhythms, but scholars McGrath and Kelly in 1986 extended it to examine behavioral and social synchrony in the organizational setting. This entrainment idea in LMX basically means that those who are close with the leader have the potential to absorb everything from the leader's goals to the leader's attitudes. Because of this bond of closeness, the outgroup suffers from a lack of emotional entrainment. Emotional entrainment affects levels of commitment as well. Higher perceived differentiation or categorization of in-group, out-group status relates to lower levels of commitment and is found to increase relational conflicts within the team. So I hope the details of exactly how LMX plays out wasn't too confusing, but really at its core, LMX seeks for leaders to just figure out who is dependable in their group of employees and then harness that power of the in-group employees to accomplish organizational goals. Grain and Ulbane, a first few of the LMX scholars, states that effective leadership processes occur when leaders and followers are able to develop mature leadership relationships, otherwise known as partnerships, and thus gain access to the many benefits that these relationships might bring. So just kind of a basic overview of LMX as it's seen amongst other scholars. It's seen as unique because it focuses on both the leaders and the followers. There are theories about leaders that might focus on the leader's skills, traits, or style and approach to leadership. There are also theories that center in on the follower or the situational context, but LMX, as we've seen, really looks at not only leaders and followers, but they mash them together, and it describes the relationship between them. This relationship is referred in LMX literature as the dyadic relationship, and that is the focal point of leadership in this theory, of course. The dyadic relationship also makes LMX theory even more unique because it challenges the assumption that leaders will treat every one of their subordinates in the same way. And that's kind of been a theory or a recurring theme of previous theories that we focus only on the manager's strengths or only on the employee's strengths. But this is sort of offering a situational approach to these manager-employee relationships. As a leader, separating out your followers in the in and out groups definitely has its benefits, but it can be a very messy process. Here we'll look at some of the issues and trends of categorization or differentiation. So although leaders want to establish positive relationships with all of their subordinates, this isn't possible all the time. You don't have time as a leader to develop every single one of your followers. So leaders are limited in their organizational resources as well as their individual resources. While being able to train all subordinates up to an in-group status would be preferable, this isn't always realistic, of course. Therefore, leaders develop differentiated relationships with subordinates, ranging from the low-quality, transactional type relationships to higher quality socioeconomic relationships with a few trusted assistants in the in-group. And so there are specific issues and trends about differentiation in the in and out group separately. So in the in group, trends occur within the in group. They are usually increased performance ratings and overall job performance. Issues related to these two ideas. And leaders are shown to be biased in favor of the in-group and inadvertently give higher performance ratings to in-group members. And this is a very big criticism of in-group differentiation. And in-group status is also shown to lead to increased job performance and sportsmanship. The in-group is also more likely to recognize compliments on their performance from leaders. And when the in-group member hears praise, they begin to be more receptive to it. And so they're more likely to notice extra praise as it comes on. Because of their increased ability to hear that praise, in-group members respond to the praise with gratitude toward the leader. This gratitude has been shown to lead to fewer physical symptoms related to stress, it leads to better sleep, and it's noted to give a higher quality of well-being. Many of these trends within the in and out groups relate to overall strengths and critiques of the theory itself, so I apologize if some of these seem to be repeated, but they are unique to in-group, out-group, and overall LMX theory. So some of the benefits of the out-group. Some theorists argue that negative differentiation in the out-group isn't always bad. A study performed by Leiden, Erdogan, Wayne, and Sparrow in 2006 found that LMX differentiation may actually boost individual job performance for those with low-quality LMX relationships. They don't seem to have any impact on high-quality LMX relationships, however. These researchers argued that the workers' out-group status actually encouraged them to try to work harder to achieve in-group status. So the negative trends in the out-group exist in perceived fairness. Fairness and justice is a big part of leader-worker relationships, as we all know. The LMX system only fails in this aspect when it's viewed as unjustly by out-group members. Erdogan and Bauer in 2010 found that when outgroupers perceived they were misgrouped and when the work environment justice climate was low, high levels of differentiation were strongly and negatively related to work attitudes and withdrawal. So if people think, that they are being taken advantage of course, that's going to negatively affect the LMX relationship. So now we'll discuss some of the strengths of the overall LMX theory. Again, some of these might relate to trends within in and out groups, but they do affect the organization differently. So high-quality leader-member relationships have been linked to more positive departmental outcomes. This entails increased job performance and increased job satisfaction of all the members involved in these LMX relationships. It also is linked to more positive follower experiences. Though at varying strengths, these positive LMX follower experiences have been found to be consistent in cross-cultural contexts as well. And it also offers more positive organizational outcomes. We see less conflict in these LMX theory organizations. We see less conflict, better performance, more frequent organizational citizenship behaviors, higher creativity, and a lower turnover rate within the organization. So there are definitely some strengths to this theory. On the downside, LMX also has its weaknesses. It's been criticized for being too broad in nature. Though this theory emphasizes the positive leader-member interactions, it doesn't exactly detail what the leader should do to kind of establish these positive relationships. So it gives us a general idea as leaders, but it doesn't teach us exactly how to interact with our employees. And because of this, you get high variability within the outcomes of LMX relationships. On the opposite end of the spectrum, LMX has also been criticized as being too narrow to apply to an entire organization. As we've seen, the focus of LMX is on one-on-one leader-follower interactions. And because of its specific personalized nature, LMX could be very difficult to generalize to the broader workplace environment. The individual level benefits in LMX do translate to a more positive organizational outcome, but this leader-follower dynamic may only effectively govern these small interactions. LMX has also been criticized for being too unfair. The theory's application rests on the leader's judgment, on one leader's judgment actually, when separating the in and out groups, and this differentiation can often get kind of dicey. It might cultivate distrust toward the leader in the end. In terms of fairness, much like praise, when followers observe practices they think are unfair, they're more likely to be hypersensitive to other perceived injustices, so that can be kind of a slippery slope to distrusting your manager. And then here, if this distrust kind of manifests itself, we will see the anger, disgust, and contempt again. If the level of LMX differentiation violates a moral norm and followers perceive it to be unfair, scholars have noted them to feel anger, disgust, and/or contempt toward the leader. These are clearly negative emotions and they will further deteriorate this fragile LMX relationship. So, as I'm sure most of us have, I've experienced this theory in action, and in my intro video for this course, I spend a good amount of time complaining about how my managers at my previous job blatantly told myself, along with some of the other lower level workers, that the managers work the quote-unquote better workers harder. And looking back on this experience, I categorized better workers as the in-group. And I knew how hard the job was, so when, after I finished my duties, I would try to help my fellow employees with theirs. After learning that my managers worked people like myself harder, I almost felt taken advantage of. And it seemed like the slackers of the department were being excused and even rewarded for by being assigned easier work. And I believe that my managers somewhat pulled from LMX theory, but from my experience, the theory may have been more useful and less offensive if the subordinates hadn't known about the use of the theory. I definitely experienced some of these negative emotions like anger, disgust, and contempt toward my managers. So I can attest to the importance of correctly applying this theory. LMX definitely could benefit organizations at the individual level, but we should be very careful as applying it as leaders. Thank you all so much for watching. Here are my references, and have a good rest of your day.